Hi, and welcome back to Learning Davinci Resolve. And today we're going to go over the edit page. This is the timeline editor where we make the majority of our actual edits before we get into the color page where we do enhancements. So we'll go over the different things that we can do here in the edit page to get you up and running as quickly as possible. We had already imported our footage on the media page, so if you don't have footage in here, go back to the media page video and see how to import the footage. So we're going to jump right in. On the very left hand side here, I have my bins, my master, my power bins, and my smart bins. So I'm not going to use smart bins right now. Power bins, we talked about, where I have things that are going to be in every video, different intros, outros, things like that are going to be in my power bins so I can access them from any project. And my current master bin is going to have ground footage. I don't have any in there right now, and my aerial footage. So I create bins in order to keep my footage organized. Now I'm going to double click on a piece of footage and see what we have here. Now I can scrub through this and see where I want my in and out points. So I hit I for in and swing over to the other side of that shot where I want that shot to end, and I hit O. Now we have several different options. One, I can simply now drag this down onto the timeline, and it takes that in and out point and moves it down to the timeline. So that's one way of doing it. If there was audio and video in here, so if this had an audio clip attached to it, when I go to drag it or hover over it, I'll have icons for audio and video, and I can choose just to drag the video clip if I want. Another way, is to drag on it to the right-hand window, and now I can have different options: insert, overwrite, replace, fit to fill, place on top, append at end, or ripple overwrite. So I can select append to end. Now, one thing I've done is set up my keyboard a little bit so I can have different key commands. So by default, hitting F12 will add the footage to, by default, hitting F12 will add the footage to the timeline as well. I think that's a little awkward on a MacBook Pro where I don't have function keys, so it takes several different keystrokes to do it. So on my MacBook Pro, I have it set up as Command E, and boom, I can just hit it on the timeline and I'm ready to go to the next scene. So multiple ways of getting footage down into the timeline. Let's go ahead and add another piece of footage here. These pieces may not make much sense in context as, a complete video here, but that's not the point. We're just going to add some clips on here. Now, one thing, if you noticed, when I dragged this down, it actually overwrote the footage that was there. Now, this isn't a behavior that I like by default. So I'm going to Command Z out of that. And notice this icon here in the middle, this magnet icon. And of course, it's N for snapping or N for magnet. Not quite sure. Anyway, I always have that turned on. Now, when I go to drag a clip in there, let me select my in point here again. So I've got my in point and out point here. Now, when I go to drag it in there, it will snap to the end. Now, I can pull it over and overwrite it, but I normally don't want that behavior. I want to just snap to the end. So turning on that magnet icon will allow that real simple snapping to the end of that footage. Okay, now we'll just move on a little bit. I'll hit set a new in and out point. And like I said, I have Command E, or you can use F12, or set up any custom key that works for you. And when I hit that, it's just going to append it to the end of the timeline. So this is how we're going to build out the timeline, is taking footage from the source viewer and bringing it down into the timeline. The window on the right is the timeline. So that is going to show us what we're working on, where the viewer on the left is the footage that we're going to put into the timeline. So hopefully that makes sense. Now I can have multiple tracks down here. Let's open up another piece of footage here and I'll select an out point. Now I can put that over it, and if it plays, then it's going to go from one piece of footage over to the one that's on top, and then back to footage that's on the bottom. So the different video tracks are like using layers. Okay, so we now have the ability to put footage into the timeline. What can we do to manipulate this footage? So I'm going to come over here to this piece of footage, and in the upper right hand corner I'm going to go to the inspector. This is where we have some of our composition tools, our transforming tools, cropping, and different tools like that we can play around with. So let's take a look at what we have. We have composite modes. So if I had multiple video tracks, I could choose what kind of blending I wanted on them. I can zoom in, position it. So I just wanted to focus on that center there. Then I could just kind of get it exactly where I wanted. So I can have a zoom effect inside of Resolve here in the timeline. I'm just going to reset that and get us back to normal here. If I need to crop the image for some reason, I can do that. Dynamic zoom allows us to do kind of a Ken Burns effect to zoom in and out of the footage. We're going to do a video on that coming up here very soon, so I'm not going to get too much into that right now. Retime and scaling sets what type of method you're going to use if you're doing a retiming or scaling. Nearest, frame blend, or optical flow, depending on what you're working on and how that piece of footage is going to look. You may pick one of these options or another. And then you can analyze for lens correction and choose some distortion levels. If you want to get rid of a little bit of barrel distortion or add some, you can do that with the lens correction. All right, now let's move down to the timeline and see a couple different things that we can do in here. I'm going to right click on it, and I can change the clip speed. So if I choose that, I can increase the speed, I can slow down the speed, make it slow motion or fast motion. I can ripple the sequence, so as I make changes, the rest of the timeline moves in or out depending on how I want to do it. Reversing the speed means exactly reversing the footage, so it'll play it backwards. So if you had a pull-in shot but you want to make it a pull-back shot, you just reverse the footage. Or I can choose a frame wherever my playhead is and use that as the freeze frame, and it'll be a static image throughout that whole clip the way you have it set up. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. All right, let's right click again, and we have retime controls. So now I can change the speed this way. I can either go to the bottom and select the little icon there and change the speed to whatever I want. And now if I turn the trim control on, see I was on the arrow key, I'm going to do the exact same thing, but I'm turning on the trim tool. Now when I do it, it moves everything in conjunction with it. Now if I don't exactly know what percentage I want, and I just want to adjust it, I can grab it at the top there and move it. I can slow it down, I can speed it up, and as long as I'm in this trim tool, it's moving everything else on the timeline with it, which I think makes life very handy for getting exactly right where I want it to be in terms of setting it to the music or something. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn that off, and then go back to retime curve, which is yet another way of changing the speed settings in here. So now I have my retime speed, and I can actually set keyframes along here and adjust individual pieces of the frame to whatever speed that I want it to be at. So this is really handy for getting fast motion, slow motion, speed ramps going, and having it smooth in or out so it looks a little more natural when you're doing it. Now this looks a little jumpy the way it's set up right now, so I want to show you a couple little tricks here to make it look a lot smoother. So where these keyframes are that I've added in, I can click on it and you see that it's set on this line tool. Well, I can change it to a Bezier. Now see what it did? It smoothed out that transition. So I'll do it on the other side. And then I have the handles here so I can really smooth it out more. And now it's got more of a bell curve versus almost a cut shot going from slower to faster. Oops, little mouse going crazy here. So let's see how smooth that looks. So it just ramps into it and ramps out of it. So very handy way of adjusting the speed of a clip. Okay, one more thing we're going to do in here is right click on it and go to clip attributes. So in my attributes, I have my frame rate, pixel ratio, a couple things you may never use, alpha modes, audio. If I'm trying to make a one-sided channel, like if I've just recorded and it's only coming out of the left side, I can set that to come out of both sides. You could add time code to here. So if you wanted to sync things up, you could manually enter time code references, and you can give it a display name so that it makes more sense as you're going through and editing your footage. Okay, back along the top, our row here, we have our selection tool, which is kind of, I mentioned, if I move things around, it just kind of does what I want it to do, but it doesn't move anything else on the screen. It doesn't, or on the timeline. So it's not my favorite way of manipulating footage around. I'm usually going to be on the trim tool. So now if I can scrub in here and change what's part of the scene I want. If I grab on the side of it and I adjust the length of that clip, you see it adjusts the clip after it. So it will push it out or bring it in. So I don't have to copy and paste and move pieces around. If I'm just manipulating that one piece, it's bringing everything else along with it. So I really love that. The next feature is the blade tool. So wherever I put the blade tool and click, it's just going to slice that up right there. So maybe I want different timing effects or different color effects or something to happen on the clip. I can just break it into multiple pieces here and then manipulate each one of those scenes individually. The next section is the way we insert. So we have an insert the clip, overwrite the clip, and replace clip. So the same way we were adding stuff to the timeline, same thing here. Whatever's in the timeline viewer, I click on one of these icons and it will drop it into place accordingly. The next one was the snap tool. So we've already talked about that and how the snap tool works. The next icon is for linking pieces of footage together. Next one is position lock. So if I want to lock a piece in position somewhere so I can't change it while I'm working on another timeline, that makes life easy. Flags and markers just allow me to put spots in here. Maybe if I'm saying it to music or I know where I want to cut, I can add a marker in here. If I hit M twice real quick, MM, now it brings up a box where I can add notes to it. So that can be very handy if I'm working with someone else and I want to tell them what I want them to do with this particular clip, or if I just need to make a note for myself of something I want to do to it, I can add it as a marker comment and refer back to it later. Okay, moving on here, we have timeline view options. So we can minimize the timeline, which is actually really good for performance. We can maximize the timeline or just kind of see thumbnails on either side. Now I find that this middle one is actually a little harder on the CPU until it sits there and renders those thumbnails down there. But the left one where it's showing the timeline or the rightmost one where it's not showing any thumbnails, those are going to be the best for performance. Now if I'm trying to cut to music, I also want to show the audio waveforms. Okay, I'm just going to grab an audio file here and drop it in place so we can see what the waveform looks like. I'm going to just zoom in real tight, and I want to make that audio track bigger. So now when I'm editing, I can see where those beats are a lot easier. If I'm cutting a music video or something where I really want to be right on those beats, being able to see the timeline here is very, very handy for making this. All right, that's going to wrap it up for the edit page. Now, of course, there's a lot more things we can do to it, and we're going to get into those in future videos. But I wanted to give you a basic understanding of how to use the edit module and be able to start cutting your first video. In our next video, we'll go into the color page and see how we can do some fine tuning of our image, and then finally to the deliver page where we can get that video output and online for other people to enjoy. Thanks for watching Learning DaVinci Resolve. Be sure and hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you're always aware as soon as we put out a new video. This has been Kerry. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.